On today's episode, I'm talking about my top 12 wide receiver rankings coming right up. And what is up, everyone? Welcome to the Gridiron Fantasy Football Podcast for Thursday, June 17th, 2021. And I'm Chip, and I'm your host. Thank you so much for listening today. If you're a new listener, thank you so much for joining us as well. If you'd like to share our podcast, you can find us over on Apple and Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, and Amazon Music. If you'd like to watch us, you can watch us over on YouTube at Gridiron Fantasy Football. So please do me a favor, hit subscribe, support the show so you don't miss any more episodes going on in this off season. And on today's episode, like I said, we're going to talk about my top 12 wide receiver rankings for 2021. But before we do that, let's get into some of the news that took place so far this week. And starting off with the Cincinnati Bengals. Right now, it looks like Joe Burrow is expecting to make a full recovery, and he should be healthy enough to be in training camp, so shouldn't miss any time, which is really good for that whole offense, for T. Higgins, for Jamar Chase, Joe Mixon, everyone involved, so really good. And then on top of that, Joe Burrow has been pretty much giving T. Higgins all the love right now. He's saying that he should have a big year this year, which, I do think like that there's a possibility of that. I know with Chase being drafted as number one pick for the Bengals in the first round, it really deflated the hype over T. Higgins because he had such a good rookie season, and then you saw them go out and get Jamar Chase. So it's one of those things where I still think T. Higgins benefits for having Chase on the field and on the same offense. And then you got Tyler Boyd, you got Joe Mixon. The only thing I'm worried about for the Bengals is the offensive line. So hopefully these things are going to happen where we see T. Higgins, take a leap forward in year two. Joe Burrow comes back healthy and he looks healthy. Hopefully be able to protect it so the offense can flourish under, Joe Burrow in his second year. But so far, good news coming out of Cincinnati. Then going on to the New England Patriots. Looks like there's been some reports out there that Mac Jones has gained more first-team snaps than Cam Newton. And based on some reports, it looks like Mac Jones is actually getting a little better than Cam Newton, which, we've seen the decline in Cam Newton throughout the year, or throughout the years. We've seen his shoulder have an issue. He just isn't the same guy. He's never been really accurate with the football. And now you take away his arm strength. I mean, it is not surprising to hear that Mac Jones is actually looking a little better than Cam Newton. But the one thing I'm not understanding with Mac Jones, I've seen some highlights, like, why is he wearing number 50? Can anyone tell me why this is happening? Because I know that you can change your jersey numbers this year. I know like there are certain players that are going from like double digits to single digits, but Mac Jones wearing an offensive line number, like, is that kind of a joke? Is that just something they gave him during like the rookie mini camps? Like, please leave a comment below. Let me know, because this is kind of making me laugh, because if he wears number 50 all season, that's going to be pretty hilarious. But so far, it's been good news for Mac Jones, so we'll see what happens. Also from New England, it looks like Jonnu Smith is not participating in minicamp. He's suffering from an apparent hamstring injury. And as a physical therapist, in working in physical therapy, like, I don't, when you hear players have hamstring injuries during like mini camps, and then you hear this like stuff go on with a lot of players, and it's frustrating because like these hamstring injuries are a nagging thing. Like, they're something that won't go away unless you get proper rest. But even then, it really does cause issues throughout the season. So hopefully, Jonnu Smith, it's a minor hamstring issue that he can come back and be fully healthy, not having more issues throughout the season. But it's always a warning sign when you hear hamstring injuries, especially this early in the offseason. And then last, you got Bears coach Matt Nagy is insisting that Andy Dalton is the Bears starting quarterback for week 1. He's standing by that. And look, that's you don't want to put Justin Fields out there. I get it, like, too early, because you don't want to hurt his confidence. But they can't continue with this. They need to just, if they drafted Justin Fields to be the future, if he's talented enough, put him out there. I don't think he can be that much worse than Andy Dalton. There's upside with Justin Fields, so I don't understand why that they're going to mess with this whole Andy Dalton thing. I know that when they signed him, they promised him he would be the starter, but obviously they got Justin Fields in the draft, and things changed. But I don't know, man. I don't like this. I'll be talking about Andy Dalton a little bit later in the episode, but I just don't like this for certain players, and it's just not good to just insist that Andy Dalton's going to be the quarterback, because I just feel like talent-wise, Justin Fields is there. I understand he's a rookie, but I do think that Justin Fields should get the opportunity to at least compete for the starting job. So that's it for the news for today. So let's go into my wide receiver rankings. I usually go from 12 to 1, so I'm going to start off with number 12. And this list was pretty interesting for me to make. A lot of guys are not in, you'd probably be surprised with some of the guys I have on this list in my top 12, but honestly, kind of looking at all the players that were available that I could put in the top 12, these seem like the best 12 that I can put there. So I know there's always going to be room for debate, but let's start off with number 12. I have Allen Robinson, right? So Allen Robinson has been a target machine, since he's been in Chicago. Last year, he finished as the wide receiver 9. He had 262.9 points. He played all 16 games. Great season last year. He had 102 receptions on 151 targets. The good thing about Allen Robinson is that he had the third most targets in the NFL, and he's led in targets. He's been up there in top 5 targets for the last couple seasons. What the Chicago Bears are good at doing is feeding him the ball. He is their number one weapon on the offense, and I think that with that being the case, if you look at his target share, he had 25.5% target share. That led the team, obviously. And, the good thing about this, too, is that not alone getting the targets overall, he led, he was top 5 in end zone targets. So you always want to see wide receivers get opportunities in the red zone and in the end zone. So, with that being the case, Allen Robinson, to me, continues to be one of those undervalued guys that he brings you a lot. He may not, win you a week with a 30 or 40 point game, but he's pretty consistent. He gets the targets, he gets the volume, so he's always going to be a good guy to get, because a lot of people are going to overlook him because he plays for the Bears and because of the quarterback play not being what it has been for the last couple of seasons. But that goes to my cons about Allen Robinson. Like I was mentioning about Andy Dalton, is that Andy Dalton's the quarterback, and it's either going to be Andy Dalton or it's going to be Justin Fields. And the thing that sucks about Allen Robinson in his career, he's dealt with Blake Bortles, he's dealt with Mitchell Trubisky. Now he has to deal with the tandem of maybe Andy Dalton plus Justin Fields. So, that doesn't bode well for him either. But also you add on top of that, he has the second worst strength of schedule for a wide receiver. So that type of stuff scares me, because, you want guys that can be consistent for you all through the season. And then when it comes to the playoffs, and then when you have a strength of schedule like this, on top of the questionable quarterback play, man, it's not good for Allen Robinson. But because of the volume he gets, he cracks my top 12 for 2021. And then going to my 11th wide receiver, I have Terry McLaurin. Last year he finished as the wide receiver 20, he had 223.8 PPR points. He only played 15 games, but he had just over 1,100 yards. He had 4 touchdowns, and then he had 87 receptions for 134 targets. So he's getting fed the ball. Washington last year was just very up and down with the offense, going from Haskins to then Alex Smith. It's just one of those things where just hasn't been consistent. But the good thing about it, his target share is 24%, and he's getting Ryan Fitzpatrick. Ryan Fitzpatrick is a YOLO type of quarterback. He's a guy who doesn't hold anything back. He loves playing football. Ryan Fitzpatrick is known to feeding his wide receivers, so I think Terry McLaurin is going to be in for a very big season. I think that it does help that he does get, Curtis Samuel on the other side of the ball or on the other side of the field. But the downside of that, will that take away from the targets that he gets? Curtis Samuel is a dynamic player. I think that he'll get utilized a little bit better than he did in Carolina, but he's going to warrant targets, obviously. So that's the only thing that I cap his ceiling out a little bit because of that. But I think no matter what, Ryan Fitzpatrick is going to just feed him the ball. I'm looking forward to kind of seeing what Terry McLaurin does this year, but I have him at my 11th ranking. And then going to number 10, I got Michael Thomas. Last year, he was injured. He only played 7 games. He was the wide receiver 93. He only had he only had 83.9 PPR points. The thing with him, he went from having a record season the year prior to just having an injury-plagued season last year. So he didn't score any touchdowns. He just had over 430 yards. He only had 55 targets. He had 40 receptions. The good thing about it, he is the guy in New Orleans, right? If he's healthy, he's gonna get fed the ball. The good thing about Emmanuel Sanders did leave. He went to Buffalo. So overall, that vacates 174 targets. So he's going to get regardless of who the quarterback is, he's going to get his targets. The good thing about it, he has a top 5 straight to schedule. So it's always going to be good for Michael Thomas. But like I said, the downside of that, there's no Drew Brees. That offense, what's the offense going to look like without Drew Brees? With either Taysom Hill or with Jameis Winston? The whole New Orleans offense right now is very questionable for me because of the unknown of what the offense will look like with Taysom Hill or Jameis Winston. So I always feel like if Jameis Winston wins the job, it's better for Alvin Kamara and for Michael Thomas. But if Taysom Hill takes it, I don't know. It's just hard because he could have completely changed the way he plays quarterback because he's a guy who was a one-read guy. If he couldn't get the number one guy on his read, he was going to run the ball. So for me, if Taysom Hill has able to increase his skill set as a quarterback, I'll gladly eat crow with that. But right now, Michael Thomas, he's just not that elite wide receiver that I look at right now as a fantasy option. But he's so talented that he still cracks the top 10, but also he's going to get the targets. So hopefully Michael Thomas is able to come back, have a strong season, regardless of who the quarterback is. So he's at my 10th spot. And then moving on to number 9, got DK Metcalf. Last year, DK Metcalf finished as the wide receiver 7. He had 271.3 PPR points. He played all 16 games. He had just over 1,300 yards. He had 10 touchdowns. He had 83 receptions off 129 targets. Okay, so the good thing about that, he got 24.5% of the target share with Seattle, just slightly under Lockett. Also, too, he had 14 end zone targets with 6 touchdowns. So big guy, big frame guy. Go up and get the 50-50 balls. He's a good guy to get in the end zone for touchdowns. But the bad side about it, too, is that Tyler Lockett's on the team, right? So Tyler Lockett, he still gained 132 targets. So I know it's not a massive difference. There's only 3 targets difference there. But it's still, I want to see, the DK Metcalf is a guy that should get most of the targets. And I think that he's able to get a little bit more. He can see that, that elite status there. But the downside too is we've seen what happens with Seattle with their passing game. Are they going to let Russell Wilson cook? Are they going to let him finally take over that passing game and just throw it over the field and, really take a step forward in that passing game? So hopefully that happens. But just like Allen Robinson, DK Metcalf does not have a very favorable strength of schedule. He's in the bottom 10 when it comes to straight schedule for the wide receiver position. He has to go against Jalen Ramsey twice a year. It's one of those things where they have a tough schedule, and you want guys that are able to, wide receivers are not always going to be consistent. Week in, week out. We see a lot of receivers have, dud games. That happens, but I just don't like the fact that he has a very tough straight of schedule and the unknowing of what happens with the passing game. But regardless, DK Metcalf, I would love to have on my team. But there's always going to be, when I do these podcasts, there's always going to be what's good about it, what's bad about it. But overall, he's an elite talent. Going to my number 8 ranking, I got Keenan Allen here. Last year, he finished as the wide receiver 13. He had 245.1 PPR points. He only played 14 games due to an injury. He had 992 yards. He had 8 touchdowns. He did have 100 receptions off 147 targets, so he's getting fed the ball a lot. He also led the team with 24.5% target share. He does have a top. He was in the top. Their offense was top 6 in passing, so obviously that's good. You want to see that in the wide receiver that you're getting when it comes to like the opportunities. But the downside to that is, can he stay healthy? He's known to always having some type of ailment, if it's back, a hamstring, whatever the case may be. Keenan Allen rarely plays a full season. But also on top of that, does Justin Herbert take the progression that we want to see in year 2? They do lose Hunter Henry, so does that affect the offense at all? Does that affect, what Keenan Allen's able to do when it comes to fantasy? Mike Williams is still there, and I was looking at the stats, and Mike Williams, he had more end zone targets than Keenan Allen. So very interesting to see that. But it's one of those things where you have to kind of look at it, and you're hoping that Keenan Allen, to me, I don't understand this, but he is a very, very underrated wide receiver. I just don't get it. I don't understand why he's a guy that just doesn't get the love that he should. And I remember last year in my draft, we do an auction draft, and he went for nearly nothing for a number one wide receiver on a pretty good team. So Keenan Allen, I think a very good value pick, even though he's ranked at 8th at my wide receiver 8, still good value there. Then moving on to number 7, I got AJ Brown. Last year he finished as the wide receiver 14. He had 241.5 PPR points. He only played 14 games last year. He had just over 1,000 yards. He had 1,075 yards for 11 touchdowns. He had 106 targets, and he got 70 receptions last year. So, obviously, A.J. Brown is a guy that I've had, since his rookie season. I love A.J. Brown. I have him in Dynasty. Just a really talented wide receiver, very good after the catch. The good thing about it for the Tennessee Titans is that they have 224 available targets this year. This is 4th most in the league. Now, Jonnu Smith goes to New England. Corey Davis goes to New York Jets. So obviously that brings in, more targets for A.J. Brown. But obviously when it comes to that, like last year he had 23.42% target share. And obviously that changed because of Julio Jones. Julio Jones pretty much will take, if you listen to the last podcast or a couple podcasts ago, I was talking about like Ryan Tannehill and all that stuff, and just kind of what the impact of Julio Jones or Corey Davis leaving and all that stuff. And I still think Julio Jones is going to be the number 2. I still think he gets about 20% of the target share, which will still make A.J. Brown the number 1 wide receiver for the Tennessee Titans. But, Julio Jones changes a lot of that dynamic on how that offense is going to be defended. So A.J. Brown, either single him up or you single up Julio Jones. Either way, A.J. Brown's going to benefit for having Julio Jones on the same team. But the only bad thing about A.J. Brown is that he has the hardest strength of schedule for a wide receiver this year. So that's what sucks about this, is that he's very talented. He'll get the volume, he'll get the targets. Unfortunately, he has the hardest strength of schedule. So hopefully we see something with that. But another thing too, A.J. Brown was 42nd in end zone targets. And I contribute this solely to Derrick Henry, right? Because Derrick Henry, he only has, A.J. Brown only has seven touchdowns or 7 end zone targets due to Derrick Henry. And that's my analysis on that. I think that they have somebody who's a semi truck in the backfield who can just get touchdowns at will, and the opportunities for him to get those end zone targets and those touchdowns is going to be very limited. So I'll love to see him get more targets in the end zone, but as long as Derrick Henry's there, it's going to be limited. So that's the only downside to A.J. Brown. And then moving on to number 6, I got Justin Jefferson here. He finished last year as the wide receiver 6. He had 274.2 PPR points. He played all 16 games. He had just over 1,400 yards. He has 6 touchdowns. He got 125 targets. He had 1,400 yards, 7 touchdowns. He had 125 targets on 88 receptions. And then the good thing about Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen has been like the number 1 wide receiver for the Vikings for quite some time. Stefon Diggs was a guy that was kind of coming up, and it was a Stefon Diggs and Adam Thielen show. But Stefon Diggs in Minnesota was never fully available. He always had some nagging injuries. But the good thing about it is that Justin Jefferson was playing all 16 games. He led a team with 26.6% of the target share. He reminds me a little bit of Tyreek Hill, right? He's a huge playmaker. I think he can score at any moment, just like Tyreek Hill can. The downside about it, he has Kirk Cousins as his quarterback, so that's the kind of the downside to it. And also, too, they're in a very run-heavy offense. So I think, I don't think you'll see Justin Jefferson be a top 3 wide receiver. I think 6 is a good number for him. I think that's a consistent thing that he could get and be in that top 10 this year. And he was a rookie. So based on what he did, we don't see wide receivers usually do so well as a rookie, and he was top 6. So I can't imagine him going any lower than that. But Justin Jefferson, he's going to be a guy that's on everyone's radar. Very good playmaker. So hopefully we see Justin Jefferson have the same season that he did last year. And then going to number 5, we got DeAndre Hopkins. Last year he finished as the wide receiver 4. He had 287.8 PPR points. He played all 16 games. He had I got him and Justin Jefferson's stats mixed up, but he had 1,400 yards, 6 touchdowns. DeAndre Hopkins had 160 targets, had 115 receptions, and the good thing about DeAndre Hopkins, he was second in the NFL in targets. He had 30.8% target share. That is a massive target share for a wide receiver. But the thing is that I know this is probably not a good take, but like, does A.J. Brown do anything to the offense and change it where that takes away some of the target share from DeAndre Hopkins? There's no question DeAndre Hopkins is going to be the number 1 wide receiver, but is there going to be a kind of a cap to DeAndre Hopkins this year? Who knows? I mean, they have a good offense. Kyler Murray continues to progress as a quarterback. They play in a tough division. That's the only thing. But last year, I just felt like with DeAndre Hopkins, if you owned him in fantasy, I really didn't see games where it's like he had when he was a Houston Texan. Like, he just took over games and he won you a week or he won you a championship because of how just dominant he was. I just didn't feel that. Even though he was a top 5 wide receiver last year, I just didn't feel that dominance from him. But he's a guy that's still a reliable guy. He's going to get the volume. But it's just one of those things is that it's just maybe he's a lot better in the second year in this offense. But DeAndre Hopkins, to me, still a top 5 guy, but he's a guy that I have never owned before. But he's not a guy that I target every year either. So anybody who gets him will be happy because of the volume. But like I said last year, I didn't really see like a lot of like him winning you a game last year. Moving on to number 4, I got Calvin Ridley here. So last year he finished as the wide receiver 4. He had 281.5 points, PPR points. He played 15 games. Last year he had 1,374 yards. He had 9 touchdowns. He had 90 receptions on 143 targets. So the pros of Calvin Ridley, right? Julio Jones gets traded. So now there's 195 targets available with the departure of Julio Jones. So there's a massive amount of targets that Calvin Ridley is going to absorb. Last year he did lead the team with 23.8% of the target share. Obviously Julio Jones didn't play a full season. So Calvin Ridley was the guy last year. And I did feel like, and if you listened to my podcast last year, if you're someone who's followed me since the beginning, is that I felt like Calvin Ridley last year was the guy. It was his year last year to take over and be that number 1 guy away from Julio Jones. So I'm very intrigued to see what he's going to do this year as the true number 1 wide receiver, because obviously his targets are only going to increase. What's nice about Calvin Ridley, he has the 6th best strength of schedule. He's in a top 5 passing offense. He was second in the league with 19 end zone targets, and he converted 6 into touchdowns. So the only downside, he did have 1 goose egg game last year, but that was kind of an anomaly. That was a fluke. But Calvin Ridley, I'm excited to kind of see what this guy does, because it's gonna be awesome. I want Calvin Ridley this year really bad, and I really don't like saying that because I have my league listens to the podcast, and I went undefeated last year, and I won my 2nd championship in this league in 5 years. So I'm just trying to kind of be careful on who I say I like, because I don't want to give away to my league mates. We moved on to number 3. I got Devante Adams. Devante Adams last year finished as the wide receiver 1. He was 358. He had 358.4 PPR points. He played 14 games. He had 1,374 yards, 18 touchdowns. He had 115 receptions on 148 targets. So I know a lot of people argue before I start this, the reason why Devante Adams is at 3, because we're not sure what's going on with the quarterback position. But the good thing about it, based on the stats last year, he had 29.5% of the target share. I mean, Marquez Valdez-Scantling was second with 13.5%. So Devante Adams is the alpha guy. That's no question. He was top 5 in end zone targets. So Devante Adams is the guy, bar none. But the downside to that is, like I said, does Aaron Rodgers play? It doesn't look like Aaron Rodgers has any. It doesn't look like he has any reason to want to play this year. He wants out of Green Bay, and it looks like he's doing everything he can to not show up to minicamp and all that stuff. So we'll see. But if that's the case, what happens with Jordan Love? Is Jordan Love, effective in this offense? Like, is he going to be a guy that can do well under this type of pressure? But I don't know. And then you add Devin Funchess returns, and they have another wide receiver. So now you got Devante Adams, Devin Funchess, you got Marquez Valdes-Scantling, you got Alan Lazard, you got Robert Tonyan at tight end. So, like, are the targets going to be there? Who knows? But he does have the fourth worst strength of schedule as well. So there's a lot of things. If Aaron Rodgers does not play next year or this year, there's a lot of things not going Devante Adams' way when it comes to the quarterback, how the offense is going to be effective, and the strength of schedule. So I know I'll probably get a lot of heat for having him third, but I think as of right now, it's a safe place to have him. He's still going to be a good wide receiver, but is he going to be as dominant without Aaron Rodgers? We'll figure this out once the season starts. All right, now moving on to my second wide receiver for 2021. I got Stefon Diggs here. Last year he finished as the wide receiver 3. He had 328.6 PPR points. He played all 16 games. Very rare that we see Stefon Diggs play all 16 games, but he did it last year. He had 1,525 yards and 8 touchdowns. He had 127 receptions on 166 targets. He led the league in targets last year. The good thing about it, he had a 29.4% target share with the Buffalo Bills. The next closest was Cole Beasley at 18%. They do get Emmanuel Sanders, right? So John Brown, I think, goes to the Raiders. The New Orleans Saints don't re-sign Emmanuel Sanders. He goes to the Buffalo Bills. Don't really think that makes a difference. I think that when it comes to Stefon Diggs, he's the alpha guy. He's going to be I don't see why his target share will go down any more than it is. I just see it's an even swap between Emmanuel Sanders and John Brown, right? I think that what hurts the Buffalo offense or hurts what the wide receiver is Gabriel Davis, right? So Gabriel Davis was a guy that was turned on, pretty good last year, and then with the departure of John Brown, you think, okay, now Gabriel Davis is going to be the guy that's going to be able to go and be maybe that number 2 because you got Cole Beasley in the slot. But it's one of those things where they thought Emmanuel Sanders was going to bring in some good dynamics to that for their wide receiver room. So we'll see, but I don't think that affects Stefon Diggs. I think if he can stay healthy, I think you'll see the same exact stuff. He has the opportunity. He has the right offense and the right quarterback to be that number 1 guy when it comes to the fantasy football. But the only thing about it is, like I said, can he play all 16 games? You're going to be drafting him pretty high this year. Is he going to be the guy that you can rely on every single game? And then does Josh Allen continue to progress as a passer? I mean, Josh Allen had a phenomenal fantasy football or phenomenal season all around last year, not just in fantasy football. But do we see him take that next step forward where he's just going to be untouchable? I mean, he was the number 1 fantasy quarterback last year, but how much further can he go up? That's going to be the question. And I look forward to seeing what Josh Allen can do this year as well and what Stefon Diggs can do. So I'm super excited about that. Now moving on to my number 1 wide receiver is Tyreek Hill, right? So he finished as the wide receiver 2 last year. He had 328.9 PPR points. He only played 15 games. He had 1,276 yards on 15, and he had 15 touchdowns. He had 87 receptions on 135 targets, and he added 2 rushing touchdowns last year to that. Tyreek Hill, what can you say about it? Obviously he's playing with Patrick Mahomes, one of the best quarterbacks in the game right now. He's always going to be, unfortunately, he's always going to be kind of second to Travis Kelce in target share. He had a 22.64% target share last year. Obviously, a good thing about Tyreek Hill, he can score at any moment. I remember last year, I live in Seattle, and it was when the Bucs were playing the Kansas City Chiefs, and they haven't broadcasted the game because it was like the game of the week on this side of the country of the U.S. And I was checking my fantasy scores. All of a sudden, the game barely started, and I already had close to 6 or 7 points because we play in a PPR league. I'm like, what the heck is going on? How did Tyreek Hill already have almost 10 points? And all of a sudden, he had that massive game last year against the Bucs. But that's where you go with Tyreek Hill. There will be games you'll be frustrated with him because he gets shut down. But then you have games he'll score at any moment. He'll score 3 touchdowns and have a rushing touchdown. It's crazy, but I love Tyreek Hill. And honestly, I don't think there's really any cons to him at all as a wide receiver. He's so dynamic. They use him so many different ways. Like I said, they rush him, as well. So like, Sammy Watkins goes to the Baltimore Ravens, so that obviously increases targets amongst Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce. Then you got Mecole Hardman, that could be a kind of a deep sleeper this year too because of the departure of Sammy Watkins. So it's gonna be interesting to see what the Kansas City Chiefs do. They have a better offensive line now, so like, I'm all about having anybody on that Kansas City offense. So it's gonna be a good year for the wide receivers this year. I think I'm excited to see what they do, but also to see if Tyreek Hill can stay in that top 5. So kind of review my wide receivers for 2021. At number 1, I got Tyreek Hill. 2, Stefon Diggs. 3, Devante Adams. 4, Calvin Ridley. 5, DeAndre Hopkins. 6, Justin Jefferson. 7, A.J. Brown. 8, Keenan Allen. 9, DK Metcalf. 10, Michael Thomas. 11, Terry McLaurin. And 12, Allen Robinson. So a little fun fact a little bit too, because they're always about like, I always feel like wide receivers is a position where it's the easiest to fill when it comes to every week, where you see the matchups, you see who's available in your free agency, and kind of plug and play a wide receiver. I feel like there's so many wide receivers that are good that you can always kind of plug and play. My strategy for fantasy football, I like having alpha, like top wide receivers. I like having 2 top 10, 2 top 5, 2 top 10 running backs on my team, and a top wide receiver. That's kind of my formula, what I do in my fantasy leagues, and if I'm in a redraft league. But when it comes to the fantasy points from the number 1 to 12, last year, Devante Adams had 358.4 PPR points, and Robert Woods was the 12th wide receiver last year in fantasy. He had 245.1 PPR points. So you only had like 4 wide receivers or 3 wide receivers that scored over 300 points last year in fantasy. On a PPR format. So the margin from wide receiver 4 to wide receiver 12 was just under 43 points that separated those guys. So like, you have your top guys. It's not like dramatic like when you see what happened last year with the tight end. Like Travis Kelce was the number 1 tight end, bar none. And then you had a massive drop off on Travis Kelce, the Darren Waller, then to everyone else. So like, that's the thing. You can spend the draft stock to get some of these type wide receivers, but the margin from that, at least from last season, was so small that you can find some really good guys and have some really good value there. So just something to think about. But what do you think of these early rankings? Do you see the justification of why I had the guys ranked where I did? Did I provide enough information where you can see why I ranked them there? And what would you argue? What would you change? Leave a comment below on your top 12 guys and let's have a discussion. But that's it for today. And you have any questions that you want to shoot me an email, you can email me at chip@gridironfantasyfootball.com. I'd love to read your emails, and if you have any ideas on things that you want to see me talk about on the podcast, just let me know. But that's it for today. If you want to follow us on social media, you can hit us up at Facebook and Twitter at the Gridiron Pod, or on Instagram at gridironfantasyfootball.com. And before I go, I just want to say happy Father's Day to all the dads out there. If you're listening to your dad, happy Father's Day to you. Just happy Father's Day to everybody out there. All the dads out there. It's just, it's nice to be able to be recognized and whatnot. I know I love spending time with my daughter and having that time with her and whatnot, but just want to make sure that all the fathers out there, at least for me, get the happy Father's Day that you deserve. So have a fun weekend, and next week I'll be doing my top rankings for the tight end position. So have a great day, and we'll see you all in the next episode. Take care.